Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Executive Subcommittee of Learning and Families of the 22nd of April 2024. Just before we start, a couple of very brief things. Just want to say thank you very much over the last couple of years to Danny for clerking both this committee and the Learning and Families Committee. I've enjoyed working with you, Danny. I quite like the way that you're approachable and human, and that we're able to have sensible conversations. That was just not to imply we don't do that with all council officers. I think I probably did just imply that. But I've enjoyed working with you. The serious point is I have enjoyed working with you, Danny. So thank you very much for all your hard work. It's been a pleasure. And to that effect, equally warm welcome though to Wallace Hakuma. Welcome, Wallace. And I'm sure we'll enjoy working with each other just as much as Danny as I had. I hope you drink less than Danny. That would be the only comment to make. But we'll move on to the serious bit as well. So welcome everybody. I don't think we've got any substitutes today, and I don't think we have any apologies. But Wallace, if we do have any, we'll hear about them.
No apologies, convener.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we move on to the minute of meeting from our committee of the 28th of August for approval. Has anybody got any comment on the minute, or can we approve them? Thank you very much. So we'll move swiftly on to the main item of the day, which is the standards and qualities in schools, learning communities and preschool centres / daycare of children, which is basically the main report. And I'm going to ask Sheena Devlin to introduce it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and I'm looking at the time. It is afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a while since I've attended one of these meetings, so I'm pleased to be back at an executive sub of Learning and Families Committee. The report that we have in front of us is the standard report that's brought following on from inspections undertaken either in our schools or across early learning and childcare, or indeed daycare services for children and young people in Perth and Kinross. Reporting of inspections here today brings us up to date since the last time this committee met, which was on the 28th of August. And the reports that we will be considering today are those for Perth Academy, Abernight, Calais and Craigie Primary. Our performance across early learning and childcare and primary inspections in all of the QIs is better than our comparator authorities and the national picture, and presents a very strong performance picture. Notwithstanding the small number of inspections undertaken across the secondary sector in Perth and Kinross over a period of time, our performance falls below both comparator and national data in all of the QI areas. Today is an opportunity to hear from and ask questions of the head teachers of each of the schools, except in the case of Craigie Primary School, where Hazel Freeland only took up post just last week. And therefore it will be Jill Dugan who will predominantly speak to the report and answer any questions. But Hazel, you are of course very welcome to offer any early observations that you will have picked up in the time that you've been at school. And so, as well as the head teachers being here, we of course have David McCluskey and Jill Dugan and myself, who are all happy to answer any questions that members may have in relation to each of the reports that we will take in turn this afternoon. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much, Sheena. I think what we'll do first of all is ask for questions on the broad report rather than any of the individual school inspections. But if you have any questions on the broad report at this point, then go for it now, please. It's always, I'm quite happy either way. Either wave at me or stick a Q in the box. It's all fine. They're coming through now, though. So, Councillor Shires first, please. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Just as Sheena has highlighted, we're below the comparators. We've had poor inspections at three Perth City schools. Excuse me. secondary schools in the last few years, the exception being Pitlochry. Who's next? This is really concerning trend in Perth and Kinross, is my question. Thank you.
It's about it. What we have is an overview of all of the recent inspection reports across secondary schools across Scotland. And it would be fair to say that the overall picture there is not a terribly glowing reflection, I think, on actually a lot of the work that is undertaken in schools. And so there's information that we can share about that. I know that members here are, of course, particularly interested in relation to the schools in Perth and Kinross. And whilst we have, as I said, a relatively small number, this is the first time that we have provided information that shows our performance relative to other schools, because our statistician colleagues will tell us that, you know, when you're dealing with very small numbers, you need to take care in terms of making any comparisons, which is why we have looked across that at a national level. And so if I just start with the national picture first and then come into Perth and Kinross, there have been discussions nationally about the picture across Scotland, and actually at scrutiny and performance on Wednesday of this week, I have invited a colleague from Education Scotland who has the lead responsibility for the secondary inspection programme to come along and present at that, because there's some interesting pictures, trends emerging that we think would warrant a wider discussion at a national level about some of that information. When you start looking at factors like free school meal entitlement, SIMDs, and link those to the evaluations of schools across the country. What we also have, of course, is an inspection is at a point in time. Schools don't stand still. And so those more historical inspection results would not necessarily reflect what the position is in the schools just now. So in terms of the high and the grammar, who will have been, you know, subject to ongoing support and challenge. And so therefore, what was the picture at that particular time, as I say, will not be the picture at this moment in time. What we do is look at what are the key messages coming through, and it's hard when the inspections are as spaced out as they are in terms of secondary to necessarily draw any firm conclusions about trends. But if we take the QI that relates to learning and teaching, then prior to the Perth Academy inspection report, learning and teaching across our secondary schools was something that David McCluskey and his team had identified was something that they wanted to focus on for that general improvement across the piece. And so there have been a range of initial activities in relation to that, and we have some further specific activities linked to the development of improving approaches relating specifically to learning and teaching across all of our secondary sectors. What we are also able to do is make judgments on where we think each of our secondary schools are, and whilst there's that universal approach to improvement, for example, around learning and teaching, then there will also be a more bespoke approach of support and challenge provided for schools dependent on their particular circumstances. Those are things that perhaps at a future time beyond committee, it might be helpful for us to take members through in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Councillor Shires, I know you've two questions. If they're related, ask them both. If they're not, ask one, and with your permission, I'll come back to you in a second.
My question very much follows on from Councillor Barrett's question. I think a number of us were at the public meeting at Perth Academy, which Mrs. Paul should be recognised for just the length of time that, you know, parents were putting questions. It was quite a marathon session, and the parents were. I'll probably come on to this when we discuss it, but I think it does. Well, it does cover the wider issue, and parents at that meeting, and we heard it at Perth High and we heard it at Perth Grammar, were just really anxious about, you know, what this meant for the quality of teaching that their children and young people were receiving. And it comes back to things that we've discussed before, which is about the regularity of inspection, the rigour of the, in education speak, was a validated self-evaluation, but knowing that head teachers are being given the support that they need to make the changes that they recognise need to be made within their school environment. And Mrs. Paul talked at the public meeting about going to, I think it was the Royal School of Edinburgh, the Royal High in Edinburgh, and you know, that opportunity to go out of their school context, out of Perth and Kinross context, to another authority and see what a really good school that has been inspected within the same set of criteria looks like. So it's just make an assurance really that we're looking for, that is going to be embedded in what we do, because whilst we know that what we do is what we do, and we know what we want to see improving. And I guess across the Tayside Regional Improvement Collaborative, there will be that work, but that going out beyond our local neighbourhood. So a wordy way of just saying, building on what Councillor Barrett was asking about how we can offer that assurance to parents beyond the schools that have just been inspected, but the ones that presumably will be in the cycle, that we're on the case and we are looking really seriously at this because we recognise their concerns.
If I could start by adding in something that I should have included in my introduction, so apologies for that, that the paper that you all have is actually a revised version of the paper. Councillor Cuthbert had identified an inaccuracy in the table in relation to the secondary inspection report, and I had contacted James about that, because the same table will feature in the paper for Wednesday's committee, but I understand that there was no issue with the table in the papers for there, so we're afraid we're not sure how that happened. However, it should not have happened, and so members of the committee will have that revised version, and I apologise, I should have included that in my introduction. In terms of the outward look, we absolutely are committed to the outward look, but there's a subtlety about that outward look that I think we can hone finer. Because if your own self-evaluation, for example, tells you that you're performing at a satisfactory level, then my strong advice, and certainly the advice of David, would be that you seek out people who are performing at good. Because what you should be doing is looking to the people who are immediately in front of you. It can often be too large a consideration to be thinking, not that your ultimate aim shouldn't be to be very good or indeed excellent, but actually the approach to that has to be one where if you're coming to a certain point, that actually it's what are the next steps for us that would take us from where we are to there, and then what do we do? And if you can overtake several, you know, in a period of time, great. But there is that bit about really understanding what is the difference between, for example, satisfactory and good, and where will I see that? And not just about going to see and speak to people, but to actually understand, and I'm going to use the J word, the journey that they have been on to get there. And it's about that, really listening to what other people are saying they had to do to get to that point. So that's an important point. The other thing I would say is that in terms of reassurance for parents want to know, well, how well are their children achieving in schools? And so the data that I have, the most recent data in relation to Perth Academy, which might be important to share in this public forum, is that if we look at some of the main KPIs, one of them being the proportion of school leavers attaining one or more passes at what's called SCQF level 5. In 2019-20, that was sitting at 87.82%. And in 22-23, that was sitting at 90.26%. If we're looking at the proportion of school leavers attaining one or more passes at SCQF level 6, in 2019-20, that was sitting at 69.82%, and in 62.82%, and in 2022-23, that was sitting at over 67%. S3 attainment in literacy and numeracy combined at 3rd or better level. Going back as far as 2016, it was sitting at 76%, and it is currently sitting at 89%. And in terms of literacy and numeracy for leavers at Perth Academy, at level 4, we're sitting at 90.77% compared with 89.7% for our virtual comparators and 89% nationally, so better. And at level 5, it's sitting at 72.3% compared with 72.6% on the virtual comparator scale and 68% nationally. So in terms of the kind of reassurance that Mrs. Paul and her team and others are able to give to parents, I think that there's an important set of data there that is helpful to share. So I think that covers the points that you made, but you're right, in terms of the ongoing reassurance, what we need to do, Councillor Shires, is look at those areas that were of most concern and understand why that was the decision and the view of the HMI team at that time, and recognise, for example, that learning and teaching is something that we do need to work on universally across all of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Well, if it's a separate question, we'll come to Councillor Cuthbert first, Caroline, and then Wheeler Hearn, and then come back to you. Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, my questions are kind of linked. I've got about 3 or 4 just under the one thing. Again, it's about the secondary education and the inspections. I was quite disappointed to see the numbers that are coming out in the chart and in the table, because whilst there's only been 4 inspections, that is 40% of our secondary school stock, if you like. And if you look at things like leadership of change, we're not actually achieving our target in any of these schools. If you take learning, teaching and assessment, we're at 100% below our target. If you take raising attainment and achievement, we're 75% below. And ensuring wellbeing, equality and inclusion, we're 67% below our target. And our target is good or better, which means that, I mean, I actually pulled out the definition from Education Scotland. I hadn't looked at it before, but it struck me that even satisfactory isn't a good qualification. For example, it says that they do constrain the overall quality of service users' experiences, and this is something that we really shouldn't be seeing in Perth and Kinross schools. So one of the things I did was I looked at the self-evaluations, and I looked at all the different schools round about, and I note that quite a few schools don't actually have the QI marks on the standards and quality reports. And first question really is why don't all the schools have them? And linked in with that is it wasn't clear whether the self-evaluations that we're doing, whether they were validated or just the school's self-evaluation. So that's the first question, if you like.
So, Councillor Cuthbert, the first thing to say about validation of any self-evaluation is, I suppose, just to kind of separate, we conducted a local authority-wide validated self-evaluation of inclusive practice the session before last. So that was, if you like, an exercise. The validation of self-evaluation that school does is an ongoing discussion with quality improvement officers and myself, where we'll go through a school self-evaluation and ask them to justify the grades that they perceive that they've given in terms of the evidence that they have. So that's more of a professional discussion that's had. And I think ultimately the self-evaluation is exactly what it says. It's the self-evaluation that a school makes of where they are on that particular place, and we'll be part of that discussion. I think there would be a cause for concern if a school leader self-evaluation was markedly different from ours after that discussion. And the discussion, more often than not, will bring us to a point of concurrence if we're not at a point of concurrence before we even begin that whole journey and discussion. And I think it's certainly worth noting that, and it's been a matter of record before from Ms Devlin, that the ratings at Perth Academy were broadly in line with what we had decided as a central team, and actually what the school had agreed themselves even before discussion with us round about that. So there is that question, if you like, about the kind of confidence round about these ratings, which is of course really important. I think in terms of standards and quality reports, which are published on our website, they absolutely should have those ratings, and some of them don't in the meantime. So that's been a discussion with our schools ongoing, and that will change with the publication of the next set of standards and quality reports that do come out, because of course, as you've said, this is a matter about public confidence, so we need to be absolutely clear, you know, in all fronts, and easily accessible through the website as well, as to what those actually are.
Sheena, to add, please.
To pick up on the point around the you know, you've heard me mention already today about the support and the challenge, and both of those aspects are really important, the support and the challenge. So if I think about the termly visits that are universal for all schools, and there will be more in addition to that depending on where a particular school is. I've certainly been a part of a number of these attainment visits in schools, Councillor Cuthbert, where, as David has said, schools will present to us and give us a view in qualitative terms, evaluative terms around the quality improvement indicators that they think leadership is good or very good or whatever that happens to be. And what ensues is a pretty rigorous discussion, because what I'm interested in is the evidence on which that is based, that that's not just a feeling or an ambition, but actually that is an informed decision based on a range of evidence. And so there is that challenge to schools around that. So that's in relation to that. There's a second bit then, isn't it, around, so if the challenge results in an evaluation that is lower than where the school thinks, what then more support, direction or challenge is required in that particular context, and that's something that is planned for. You raise the point around not every publication on the website will necessarily have that same information, and that's something that has been picked up on already, and that needs to be more consistent. And the other thing that I've certainly been in discussion with colleagues across the education and learning team about is that if we are undertaking a visit to a school, a quality assurance visit to a school that results in a report that goes back to the school, then some time ago those reports would also feature on the school's webpage, and they haven't of late. And so that is something else that we will be looking to bring back in, so that when you then look on a school's webpage, you should be seeing the standards and quality report, any link to any inspection report, but also any link to any report that is undertaken by officers in the education and learning team for that particular school. And that will also go on the website as well, to add to that process of openness, and also, we hope, in time, reassurance.
Yeah, if it's related, just carry on, Councillor Cuthbert. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that all the standards and quality reports will include the QIs. I think that's important, and I'm pleased to hear that any evaluation documents will be going up as well. I assume from what has just been said then that the standard and quality report for Perth Academy wasn't evaluated and had gone through the process of being validated, because that actually had 4 satisfactory marks, when in fact the Education Scotland inspection had 2 satisfactories and 2 weak, which in my view questions the whole process of self-evaluation and the validation. And I'm just really wondering, how much confidence can we put in this process? Because I would expect the council to go further than Education Scotland and actually be more critical of ourselves, so that we under-promise and overperform, whereas at the moment we're over-promising and underperforming. And I think that's really, really important. So I'm really trying to get down to how much confidence can we have in this validation process. One of the questions I have is why are parent councils not involved in that validation process? Because when Education Scotland come in, that's the first thing they're going to do, is talk to parent council. But we don't do that. We seem to be just coming in and looking at what the school's got to say. Come on.
Sheena first then, please, and Dave following. Thank you.
Can I come in on the validated self-evaluation bit, because I think we're conflating a couple of different things here around that. So that there was an actual exercise, if you like, that was a series of visits to all of our secondary schools under the heading of validated self-evaluation that was about looking at aspects of inclusion. And during the course of that work, parent councils would not routinely have been involved in that. That was a specific piece of work linked to a broader piece of work, Councillor Cuthbert, that's national, called collaborative improvement. And that work had stemmed from that, so that was quite separate. But where there's and the team will correct me if I've got this wrong, a quality improvement visit that results in a quality improvement report, a QIR, then it may be, depending on what the particular themes are, that parents and parent council will be involved in that. So, and that's another means by which self-evaluation can be validated, but it's not that validated self-evaluation process that was quite specific around the inclusion agenda. So I don't think it's accurate to say, and Jill and David are agreeing with me as I'm looking over here, to say that parents and parent councils would not be involved in some of that self-evaluation work, because it's undertaken by education officers in conjunction with the schools. In the specific instance around the validated self-evaluation of aspects of inclusion, that need not have happened. But that routine self-evaluation framework, the voice and the views of parents are taken account in regard to that bit. So that was the bit I wanted to pick up. But David, you were going to pick up around the differentials between where a school might evaluate itself, where we might evaluate itself, and where at GMI might have evaluated itself, and I guess the link between each of those evaluations up and down. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, Councillor Cuthbert, as you say, Perth Academy in this particular instance had evaluated with 4 satisfactory grades, and Education Scotland eventually, I suppose the key word here is eventually, left having given 2 satisfactory grades and 2 weak grades. I suppose your question round about the validity of those self-evaluation discussions would be one, as you said earlier on yourself, you know, satisfactory is not good. You know, satisfactory is strengths just outweighing weakness, and weak is the other way around of that particular picture. So in the particular case of Perth Academy, I think one of the things that's probably important to recognise is that the team themselves who spent the week in school would have spent an awful long time deliberating upon the grades that they came up with. And I suppose there's a number of us in the room who are associate assessors with HMI, and they know the amount of discussion and debate that goes into that. And particularly when ratings are sitting, you know, perhaps where there are those robust discussions to be had about where they end up. A particularly good example of that with Perth Academy was round about the attainment and achievement picture, where the team themselves you know, had spent an awful long time deliberating upon that that outcome, and then we'd a further discussion with them. So, you know, I think if a school was rating themselves as good and HMI were going in and rating that as weak, we would certainly have serious concerns about the evaluative ability of that school than anybody else. I think, however, you know, clearly leadership of change is sitting at satisfactory. That was a point of agreement. Clearly, ultimately, attainment and achievement was sitting at satisfactory, and that was a point of agreement. I think Sheena's already spoken about the journey we're going to have to undertake around about 2.3, which is learning and teaching, about what good really looks like, and there's a bit of shared understanding around the piece. We've done a lot of work with schools on attainment and achievement, and that's been evident in a lot of the data that we've put in front of you. And I think possibly in terms of Perth Academy in particular, there was a weak rating returned for 3.1. And I think there's a bit about the point in time when things happen. So when the school self-evaluated as satisfactory at 3.1 at the beginning of that session and that cycle, that felt like an accurate judgment. but a number of events throughout that year probably tipped it over to the point into being a week, just where those weaknesses just outweighed the strengths that were there in the school. So as Sheena said, it's an ongoing and it's a robust discussion that's had, and that includes within our colleagues who work for Education Scotland to spend a week really getting under the bonnet of each of these QIs to ensure that it ends where it should end.
Thanks, David. I'm going to give Bailey Hearn a shot, but I'm quite happy to come back, Councillor Cuthbert, if that's okay. Bailey Hearn.
Yes, thanks very much. Most of my question has been asked by these two, but also probably answered, and I'm going to try and do it in a different way. The inspection for the academy, we're bringing somebody from outside the authority to come in and give support, and also we've got Breadalbane Academy. You've got one of the head staff in the academy trying to help them. But when you look at it overall, and I look at the table that was on page 30, where it gives the 4 secondary inspections, so 2018 and 2019, you've got 2 of our secondary schools only managed to receive to get a maximum of satisfactory. 4 years later, we've got another 2 schools, satisfactory and weak. Okay, we did achieve 2 good comments in there. But if I was looking at it from somebody outside the authority, I'd be going, what's going on with Perth and Kinross in terms of their secondary schools? And what's common to that? And that's the educational authority. And has the educational authority taken their eye off the ball? If that's all you can achieve on 4 of your secondary schools over a period of 4 or 5 years, is there not something fundamentally wrong with the way that the education services are looking at the schools? They can do it really well with the primary schools, but there seems to be a problem when it comes to secondary schools, especially when it's over a period of 5 years. I would have expected if as an authority, so 2018 and 2019, wow, we've got 2 secondary schools that are satisfactory, we need to put our socks up. But yet 5 years later, we're in exactly the same position. So what's going to happen moving forward? Is there going to be an evaluation in terms of the educational authority, in terms of what are we expecting? How do we achieve that? I do know we've got 1 or 2 that do that, but we seem to fail on the majority of them. So my question is, have we taken our eye off the ball, and what are we going to do better? And you've probably answered in some respects some of that, but it just doesn't appear to me like we're improving ourselves as an authority.
I think it's a fair point and it's a fair question. I think most of it has been answered. However, I'll ask Sheena and David if they want to add to anything that's already been said, but I think, that a lot of it has been answered, to be fair, so I don't know. David, please, and then Sheena.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to, in my mind, marshal what's been said already so as not to go over ground that we've already covered. I suppose what I would say is that if you think about the educational provision within Perth and Kinross, we have 11 discrete separate secondary schools, all individually led, and then we've got strategy, policy, support and challenge, which is part of, as Sheena elucidated earlier on, part of our statutory job really as a local authority to provide that. So, I think that where we are right now is a place whereby we have made improvement. So, for example, the kind of whole attainment and achievement journey has been one where we can demonstrate improvement over a period of time. I think one of the things that's quite unfortunate is that when HMI do come to you, they look at a historic picture of attainment and achievement. So we're very much prisoner of where we've been in the past round about that. I think that one of the things that's been mentioned before, and I will return to again, is that understanding about what good learning and teaching looks like. And I think we have work to do there to support our colleagues. And that some of that's already been touched on here, because I think that the work that we have done up until now has maximised attainment and achievement for the young people in our schools. I think we need to now put more focus on the input to help maximise that further and take it to the next level. So I suppose in summary, Bailey Hearn, yes, there's still much work to be done. And, this isn't a position looking at these grades where any of us are happy. None of us are sitting here in any way taking this on our slide, it has to change. There's a plan that it will change. And as I say, that the kind of strategic direction that we'll take in the next 2 years will affect and bring about that change, while we continue to improve the other areas that are mentioned as part of, and actually indeed the QIs are not part of the inspection process as well. But that central function of learning, teaching and assessment and quality of teaching is the most central part of that, is where our attention will find itself for the next 2 years.
Thanks, David. Sheila?
Just a couple of things I would like to add, if that's okay. And David's made the point a couple of times this afternoon that there has been a clear focus on raising attainment across our secondary schools from the colleagues in school and colleagues within the central team. And that is showing progress and improvements are made across probably all areas. And we see that in the Raising Attainment Strategy and the Education Services Plan. So where there has been a focus for improvement, we are seeing an impact of that focus. The team that can affect change and improvement in a school doesn't just exist within an education authority, it also exists in the schools. And it's the combination of leadership teams in schools working with the team at the centre, if you like, that actually, when that works well together, affects the best and most sustainable change. And so the main areas that we'll be focusing on are that interaction individually, every teacher, every classroom, in other words, learning and teaching, but also in terms of that leadership of change and improvement as well. And so there are some key things that we've got in place this term, and using the opportunity of when schools are off main timetable for the SQA exam diet to be targeting different senior groups within schools. And we've actually got an event at the start of June organised by Perth and Kinross Council around that leadership and management of change that we are expecting then to see leaders in schools take that into next year's standards, school improvement plans and so on, and begin to affect that change. So there's a range of things there that I would say in a nutshell, where the focus of the team has been, they have seen improved outcomes without a shadow of a doubt. So I wouldn't agree with the characterisation of the eye's been taken off the ball, because where the eye was firmly on the ball on raising attainment, that's proven to have dividends there. And that this area of learning and teaching and leadership, working together with senior leaders from our schools, with our education officers, because it's a collective responsibility to improve. It doesn't sit with one group of people or another. It's that combined responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillor Shires, do you want to come back with your second question, and I'll come to you, Councillor Cuthbert.
Quite a lot of the question has been answered, and quite a lot of reassurance from the officers. Questions about the autonomy that a head teacher has to make decisions within their school about how their particular context, their school community functions. I mean, anyone who's a parent of teenagers knows that, it's been a really rough couple of years, and we've seen the result of that in terms of behaviour, attendance, support needs. All of that has increased and changed the context of schools. And so how much autonomy do they actually have to decide how things are going to progress in their school? Because we're hearing quite a lot about, the quality improvement framework and the support, the kind of levels, but ultimately when these reports are issued, there is one person and their team that is the focus of attention from pupils, from parents, from the wider community, and I'm just genuinely curious about how much autonomy they have to actually make decisions.
We'll ask the head teachers. I'll give you my answer first. I think autonomy is really important, because no one knows a school better, and the most important thing about the direction of a school comes from the leadership of that school, not just the head teacher actually, but his or her support team as well, I believe. But I don't know if any of our head teachers do want to comment on that. Sheena, have a word, and there's no pressure to, but actually you're here. Nice to meet you.
I think, you know, in a meeting like this, getting into the detail of, I guess it's about what does autonomy mean in different contexts where there's a legislative framework, for example, do you know? So you've got autonomy to do what within a legislative framework, or the other thing is, you know, if you are, for example, given advice and you don't take that advice because you have the autonomy not to, and the outcomes are not good, then whose responsibility is that as well? Do you know? So that there's a bit for me that absolutely is about head teachers, and that, just to be clear, I'm not talking about any of the papers that are here or the head teachers here today, but that there are frequent discussions about what does that autonomy actually mean in terms of the legislative framework that we work in, and within the policies and guidance of a local authority as well, which we know can be broadly similar across the piece in many ways, but can also be quite different depending on the different contexts that different local authorities find themselves in, urban, rural, a mix of both, and all of that as well, Councillor Shires. So I think it would be helpful to hear the views of the head teachers, because I could say I think they have a lot of autonomy. They might say, no, they don't. You're always telling us this is what you expect. This is, you know, I think it's autonomy within a framework which is important, and within that then the ability to make sound and wise and judicious judgments about things. So autonomy doesn't come without the responsibility of that aspect as well, is what I would say. Thank you.
So Sheena, you got to the nub of what I was asking, and that is, you know, we've had the national discussion about autonomy for head teachers, etc., and it is, have we got it right at our policy level across Perth and Kinross? So where we've seen this, you know, primary schools are here and secondary schools are not there yet. Hopefully they'll get there. You know, is there something that's not right in our policies that's affecting that?
And that's interesting, because our quality improvement framework is a universal one, and the policies that are set by Learning and Families in the council are universal to all as well, do you know? And I guess that's then when you come into different contexts, different environments, but so there's a lot that's the same, and for us it's just about understanding the application of that and what might be getting in the way or needing to be changed in a different context as well. Thank you.
Yes, okay.
I would say that there is great strength in autonomy with the head teachers in Perth and Kinross. I mean, there's a real collective drive from not just within our own team, but also from the centre, in terms of our curriculum design, in terms of our budgets. And I feel very empowered as a head teacher within Perth and Kinross to make decisions in which suits my context of my school. So that's helpful.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. I think that is helpful. Thank you. We're going to have a question from Councillor Barrett and another one from Councillor Cuthbert, and then we'll move on, if that's okay.
Thank you. This is a question that I'd actually prepared in the context of Perth Academy, but I think it goes further. And I do welcome what you've said about the emphasis on learning and teaching, and just to get a better understanding of that, you're talking about that rolling out across all the secondary schools in Perth and Kinross, not just the academy. And do you think that will help to tackle the problem there seems to be with self-evaluation and its validation? Because there does seem to be an issue there about people or schools recognising that they've got problems and they need to do something about it, and either ask for help or reorganise themselves. Thank you.
The short answer to is the approach, the focus around learning and teaching going to be one that covers all of the secondary sector is yes. And the second part, Councillor Barrett, is really interesting, because I mentioned earlier about being part of some of the termly attainment visits in schools where, you know, senior management teams have shared, for example, and this is absolutely not the case of anybody here, that they have evaluated their leadership of the school as good, bordering on very good, for example. And what has ensued is a discussion, as I say, based on, well, can you give me the evidence, and let's agree on what the metrics might be that you would decide that gets you to that point. And of course, on the providing of that information and the ensuing discussion, we have then collectively agreed that actually there's not the evidence that would support that. So that's an ongoing part of the leadership development, and not that's not the domain of head teachers either, nor is that the domain of head teachers and their deputies. That's actually the responsibility of every principal teacher, every deputy, every head teacher, and indeed every teacher in all of our schools, to genuinely understand that what they're delivering, they're able to provide evidence that would support whatever their view is of how well or otherwise that QI is being delivered in the school. And so one of the big bits of work that we've got coming up later on this month, it is indeed this month, is actually targeted at principal teachers in secondary school and the link deputies for those principal teachers, so that there's that connectivity and ability then that you're not being involved in these improvement activities and then going away back to your school in isolation of other colleagues who have also participated in that. And there will be expectation then around how you take that forward, because principal teachers are not just teachers within the department. They have a responsibility at a principal teacher level for the quality of the learning and teaching in their department. That's where that responsibility initially sits, and then it moves further up. And that can't, you can't want that position and not take the responsibility that goes with that. And so we're quite clear that that focus has to be a dispersed and collective approach to improvement. And so that work around self-evaluation will touch on many and not a few.
Thank you, Sheena. That's really helpful and really reassuring that it is going to cut right across schools and not just the very senior leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. I've got two questions, both for you. The first thing is, I'm a little bit uncertain that I'm comfortable with how the self-evaluation is working. So I was going to ask if we could have a briefing paper to just outline how it's done, so that we can understand who's consulted and so on, because we can then compare it to what Education Scotland do. So that was the first bit.
Yes.
And the second thing is that the schools presumably every year do the self-evaluation, and it then goes into the standards and qualities report. So what I'm wondering is whether we can have another meeting coming up, a report which identifies each of the schools with the 4 QIs, with the levels that the schools are believe they're at, but with the proviso that everyone that's satisfactory or below has some detail about how they're going to raise the attainment in that section to raise it up to a good, so that we're actually getting forewarned rather than coming into this like we do now, where we're sort of ambushed. Here comes the Education Scotland report, says you've got 2 weak QIs when you've been thinking it was 4 satisfactory. So I'd rather know in advance. So if we could have a report like that, then we can debate what's in the report.
I think that sounds eminently sensible. What I'm going to do, rather than promise that when I don't know is the answer, with your permission, I will discuss that with colleagues and come back to you in due course, if that's okay. But I do think a briefing and indeed a workshop on the way we self-evaluate would be really useful. So yes to that. Thank you. Sheila?
With your indulgence, Councillor Cuthbert, I think, as conveners just said, a workshop that would support a paper is probably more helpful than a paper that you might then have further questions about, because what we would want to do is bring that to life. And I think we would want to include head teachers in that workshop as well. Thank you.
Just come back to say thank you. That would be wonderful. But I'm still quite keen to see a report with all the different QIs marked up.
Absolutely. I will come back to you. Yeah, absolutely. It's really how best we do that rather than trying to avoid doing it, if that's any solace. Thank you. Just before I'm going to ask everybody to agree the report, I think it's probably important I make some very brief comment. And I think it's also really, and there is a however coming up here before I get looks from anybody in front of me. I think it is really important to acknowledge, however, that all of our secondary schools do fantastic work day in, day out in many ways. And I think we need to acknowledge that. The however is that we quite rightly aspire to a minimum of good in our inspection reports, and the numbers are disappointing, Councillor Cuthbert. We cannot sugarcoat that, and we need to do better, as it were. I also think it's really important that we don't wait for a less than satisfactory inspection report before we get better, as we have done in the grammar and the high school. So I think there's no sugarcoating when I say that, but it is also important to recognise the great work that's done in all of our schools across all of our sectors every day. It does need to be a balanced consideration, but I think this has been a really useful, if not challenging discussion. So I thank the members in front of me, and if I can ask everyone to agree the report at this stage.
You can't agree with the report when we haven't discussed the appendix. Still part of the same report.
For it. Baileyham.
That was just my point. We can't agree the report because we haven't discussed the appendix yet. If you agree the report, that's it. End of it.
I think we can agree the narrative of the first section at this point, with if Councillor Frampton's happy to second it. Is that all right? Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you for your patience at this end of the table as well. I think that was an important discussion to have. I think Mrs. Dugan, are you going to be? Mr. McCluskey, of course, you'll introduce Eleanor Paul and the first bit of the appendix. Thank you.
Thanks very much, convener. Perth Academy is a 6th-year secondary of 1,016 pupils in 2023. Also designated as a Gaelic medium education centre for Perth and Kinross Council. And in November 2023, a team of inspectors from Education Scotland visited Perth Academy. It was a full inspection, and the ratings, as we know, were Leadership of Change Satisfactory, Learning, Teaching and Assessment Week, Ensuring Wellbeing, Equality and Inclusion Week, Raising Attainment and Achievement Satisfactory. The inspection team found the following strengths in the school's works. These apply to Gaelic and English medium education. So the first was that through a period of considerable change, the head teacher has established a clear vision for improvement. She's increasingly engaging stakeholders in school improvement and providing support and challenge to the school community to increase aspiration and ambition. Young people are welcoming and respectful. Most demonstrate a positive attitude to school and value their learning. Young people are developing important skills through their participation in a wide range of out-of-class activities. Following areas for development were identified. The local authority should continue to work with the head teacher to stabilise school leadership and support school improvement further. All key stakeholders, including learners, should be engaged more effectively in agreeing improvement priorities. Staff need to improve the quality of learning and teaching across the school. They should plan tasks and activities that are more motivating, relevant and set at the right level of difficulty for young people. Senior leaders and staff should review approaches to improving well-being, attainment and achievement to enable all young people to maximise their potential and achieve success. All stakeholders should contribute to improving well-being for the whole school community. The local authority should continue to support staff as they improve Gaelic and implement their vision for change. Young people should be encouraged further to continue with Gaelic medium education as they move from primary to secondary stages and through the senior phase to gain qualifications. All staff across the school should play their part in developing a positive ethos for Gaelic that promotes equality and equity. As a result of their inspection findings, Education Scotland felt the school needed additional support and more time to make necessary improvements, and they will return to the school to carry out a further inspection within 12 months of the publication of the inspection letter. I'm now going to pass over to Ms. Paul, and she'll outline at reasonable high level some of the improvement actions that she's carried out since the inspectors left Perth Academy.
Thank you, David. Ms. Paul.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon. Since we received the report, we have created an action plan based on all of the points in the letter to parents, but also in the summary of inspection findings, focusing primarily and with priority on learning, teaching, wellbeing, equality and inclusion. We've had 2 dedicated in-service days, completely given over to the focus on learning and teaching pedagogy. That was the main thing that was really highlighted, was about learning style, active learning. And so we have really been drilling down into what the aspects of learning teaching are that we need to improve upon. We have had a pupil voice session gathering evidence about where they see the good learning and teaching and experience positive learning experiences in Perth Academy, so that we can build on and harness that good feedback from young people. And we're creating a learning and teaching policy, but we have actually come to a shared understanding of what learning looks like at Perth Academy in terms of what you should see in a lesson across the school, to get that consistency of approach, so that each lesson has all the correct characteristics that are outlined in the report that they felt were not consistent or were not there in all areas of the school. The impact of this work is already evident, because pupils are reporting anecdotally much more consistency in terms of the terminology used, in terms of their experiences of what constitutes a good lesson. And we have set up a scrutiny group which met for the first time last week, which includes parents who were interested, pupils who showed an interest in being involved, and we deliberately focused on young people in the middle of the school rather than seniors, so that they can contribute to the building of the future of the school. There are also representatives from staff on that group, and the purpose, the key components of that group are, the purpose is to scrutinise the school's action plan and to challenge and support us with that. So we've got a range of expertise from the parents involved. For example, we've got someone who's got previous experience in further education. We've got someone who is a project manager. We've got someone who works in finance. So there's there's lots of expertise there that we can harness to make sure that we are really challenging ourselves, and that's the purpose of the group. We've made arrangements, as was mentioned previously, with peer partner schools. So Kinross High School, which anticipating by its self-evaluation activities is good to very good, and the Royal High School in Edinburgh, which received a really high level inspection report. We wanted to make sure that we were being really aspirational in going to visit that school to see what we could learn. We have improved the logging of bullying incidents. That was given to us as an urgent action for the school, to make sure that that's done consistently in line with Perth and Kinross requirements. And we put evaluations in process for those experiencing, because in the feedback it said that young people were not feeling that things had been dealt with to their satisfaction. So what we're really trying to tease out now is, every time there's an incident reported, how did you feel that was dealt with? What is it you think that we could do better? And to really give young people that opportunity to feed back into the system as to what their experience is and why they don't feel that things are being dealt with effectively. We have introduced staff and pupil focus groups fortnightly to make sure that we are collaboratively focusing on school improvement priorities. And we have got a separate action plan for the intensive support provision and for the strategic improvement of Gaelic medium at Perth Academy. So we have put a lot of effort and focus on learning and teaching, because that has come across as something that encompasses everything that will move the school forward. And next session, we're really going to be focusing on curricular review. So what are we learning and what are we doing in the classroom? Is it skills focused? Is it focused on the future skill set that a young person will require when they leave Perth Academy? And also we're working to make sure that we are making the school feel safe, that we are listening to young people and giving them that voice and that responsibility and privilege to actually and effectively be part of the leadership of the school.
Thank you, Ms Paul. I know there'll be questions, there are already questions, but if anybody has any questions on the Academy report in particular, then stick your cue in the box now or wave. You're going to start with two related questions, I think, Councillor Barrett.
Yeah. I think, sorry, just, yes. As we all recognise, this report is of great concern to the pupils, the parents, the carers and staff, not just in my ward of Perth City South, but right across Perth and Kinross because of the wide range of feeder schools. The weak evaluation for wellbeing, equality and inclusion is very concerning. And I just, one thing that was raised at the public meeting was about transfer of children coming from primary schools and the opportunity there for getting it right for every child, which seemed to be being missed, certainly in some cases. So do you now have a proper process for children's plans during the transition from primary to secondary that's happening just now to involve the parents? Because, as I say, that doesn't seem to have been happening consistently in the past. Thank you.
Ms Paul.
Thank you. I think a number of parents have reported that there has been an improvement in their experience over the last year's transition, and there's a new principal teacher of additional support needs in place who's working with principal teachers of guidance to try to make sure that their process and their shared responsibility of gathering that transition information and distributing it correctly so that it's effective for all young people is improving even since last session's transition period.
Thank you, Ms Paul. I mean, I know, I don't doubt for a second what you're saying, Councillor Barrett. I know anecdotally that Lethem Primary's transition has been pretty smooth and they speak well of it, but I know that's only I know there are anecdotes to the opposite effect as well. But do you have a second related question at this point? Bailey Hearn.
Thank you very much. Yes, my question includes the children's plans, but I want to pick up on the ensuring wellbeing, equality and inclusion, which was marked as weak. And in your opening remarks, you mentioned the ISP provision as part of a sentence. But one of the big points in the public meeting was additional support needs. And in that school, in your school, there's 30%. Was a figure banded about children requiring additional support needs. And that's nearly 300 pupils. And it was a grave concern for some of the parents that were there that they didn't think that the pupils were getting the support they needed. And part of my question is the children and young people's plans. Do all the children that are on ASD or intensive support provision, do they have a plan? And is it followed? And what are you going to do to get more support for those pupils that require the additional support needs?
I think it's more than 30%, but I'll let the expert answer the question.
Yes, it is. It's 37% actually, and I agree with you about the challenge that brings in a school of the size of Perth Academy, and we have an ISP. However, what I do think is that when I was talking earlier about the learning and teaching policy in the school, we think there is a job to be done to make sure that teachers are upskilled to classroom teachers to understand the needs of their young people and to have that a skill set of universal support for every classroom where there is that there is a resource there where they can easily tap into information on specific additional support needs and what is required for them. So, for example, if every classroom should have a box where they have different coloured overlays, for example, for dyslexia. What we're working to do is make sure that that universal support is seen as integral to learning and teaching in the school, and that's been part of our focus for that. In relation to children and young people's plans, there is a process for that. Some young people come with plans historically from primary school. Some require them once they arrive at secondary when they didn't have them previously. So what we're working to make sure is that those thresholds for asking the questions about where a child's plan should be created are very transparent and clear to all concerned.
Thank you. How do you work with those that need to come out of the classroom for a break or for calming down? Do you have the provision there for that? And how is that monitored and how is that used right across the school?
There's a quite a wide range of different things that we put into place, and different aspects of support for pupils within the school. So different areas for different things. In terms of the universal classroom approach, we have a relationships policy where a young person might have a reflective conversation with the teacher. They might have a reflective few minutes outside the room. They may be relocated to another place in the school to receive further support. All of those things are logged, and then we look at the interventions that have been logged, and the principal teachers of guidance with responsibility for those young people will manage as to whether parents need to be contacted, where there are patterns emerging, and also looking at that where departments are managing really well to support young people and what it is that they're doing to do so.
Thank you, Ms Paul. Councillor Frampton.
Can you tell us a bit about the inclusive team that's working in the zone at the Academy, please?
Thank you. The Inclusion Project at Perth Academy has been running for 10 years. It started off as an alternative to exclusion only, and it has grown and developed and matured over time to being a very successful and impactful intervention suite of experiences. So young people would have, if we have a serious incident, for example, we would always look to undertake an alternative to exclusion programme rather than exclude. Because then in the programme that young person will work intensively to look at the incident, what's happened. They look at their wider well-being, and they have an opportunity to talk about their needs and what impacts have happened as a result of their time in school, or to explore the issue in more depth. And then at the end of that process, a parent would come in and meet, and they would look over the work that they had done together, agree targets, and that young person would come back into school. So that's the alternative to exclusion part of it. There would also possibly be restorative work undertaken if there had been an impact on others involved in the incident. But the group also, the senior project officer who runs the project has a social work qualification. She links in with the welfare rights team, and there are a range of proactive supports put in place too. So as I'm mentioning before, if there was a pattern emerging of a young person being out of class for quite a lot of time, then that would be picked up, and a one-to-one might be put in place weekly, or they might be involved in group work in the inclusion project. So yeah, a huge range of really successful interventions put in place at that kind of targeted level within the school.
Thank you. Councillor Shars.
The first improvement action refers to stabilising school leadership, and we also heard at the public meeting, so it's kind of a two-parter. So there was this issue about stabilisation of the school leadership, and we also heard at the public meeting from a number of the parents that were present about their concerns about staff absence and staff well-being. And my question is that situation stabilising now? And on the kind of other side of the coin was just to comment about the amount of extracurricular work that so many staff do undertake, and that should definitely not get lost in the mix, because it is hugely important and clearly adds to life at the academy. However, there was this concern that was raised by a number of parents at the meeting that would be helpful to have an update on.
I think just before I ask Ms Paul, I think your question, at least to some degree, gets towards the nub of the matter, possibly, but Ms Paul.
Thank you. David McCluskey and I have been in regular contact and discussion about how best we can stabilise the senior leadership at Perth Academy, and there have been steps taken to make sure that that happens. Obviously, we have a range of difficulties, but we are about to interview tomorrow for the first stage of the new deputy appointment. So when we get to August, we'll have a new person in that post ready to take on that strategic leadership of the welfare, equality and inclusion agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Barrett, and then I'll come to Councillor Cuthbert, please.
It's just another issue that came up at the public meeting was about communication with parents. And I just wondered when you expect to start sending regular newsletters to the parents and how often they'll be going.
Thank you. It was weekly at the end of last term, and I'm still working on feedback as to the frequency. As I said at the public meeting, there's a divide on how often people want to hear from the school. So we're trying to get that balance correct, but we are working on the parents' communication policy in partnership with the Parent Council, and that should be up and running very soon, which will include communication and expectations around that.
Thanks again. Councillor Cuthbert, I don't doubt your unerring ability to wrap several questions up in the one, so if that's not possible, don't do it, but go for it anyway.
Yeah, I've got several things I picked out from the report. I was just going to read bits out and then just ask how they're going to be acted on. So they're not.
Go for it, it's fine.
Okay, if you don't mind. The first one is the report says a majority of young people think that the school considers their views, while a minority think that schools take their views into account. So I'm just wondering, that presumably means that a majority think that the school doesn't take their views into account. So I'm just wondering, you've had the report, you've put together a plan, how are you going to tackle that particular problem?
The pupil voice aspect of listening to young people is very much at the heart of what our school is all about. So I'm really keen to change that narrative so that young people do feel that their voice is not only listened to but taken into account. What we've done most recently is that one of the teachers in one of the departments is leading on pupil voice. He's created a pupil voice conference. And what he did last year was he did one, but we've already done another one to look at where are you finding good experiences of learning and teaching, for example, and we're working towards a coherent model which shows all of the different levels throughout the school where young people's voice influences change. And then the flip side of that is making sure that we feed that back to young people and that young people are involved in that. So, for example, the pupil voice leaders telling pupils at assembly what the impact of their input has been. So that's the plan and the trajectory for that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just
keep going.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Okay, the next minority of young people say that they have experienced bullying, and a significant minority of young people feel that bullying is not always dealt with effectively. So there's two parts to my question on this. I presume that the Perth and Kinross policy on bullying is being applied, but from what's being said here, it's not working. Would you comment on what you're going to do about that comment and a more general question about the bullying policy and how it's working?
My view is that the young people who have responded in the survey to say that they've experienced bullying is more than you would ever want there to be. And part of dealing with that, of course, is following Perth and Kinross policy. The recording of that is a separate issue, which is what I highlighted earlier. And I think what we have worked on over this last term is to be much more robust in our challenge to those who have the responsibility for logging that as to the follow-up and follow-through regarding feedback. So what I mentioned earlier was that we're asking young people to tell us, you reported this, how well do you think it's been dealt with? What do we need to do to improve? And parents also have the ability to feed back on that. And so part of the responsibility that's been given to principal teachers of guidance is to have a more effective evaluation process in place. I think there are a level of bullying incidents in every secondary school, and what we have to do is amplify that voice of what we do at this school that incorporates behaviours and relationships that mean that it's very obvious as to what we're not looking for, and to focus on what we are.
I think your question's related, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because it was a huge concern at the public meeting, and it actually, I think, got most of the comments and the backstop of people with regards to the bullying policy that was there. And I think a number of parents said that their pupils didn't feel safe in the school because of the bullying. And there were a lot of comments regarding the fact that there's no consequence for bullying. It just allows to continue on because nothing was done about it. And we've already heard about the fact of exclusions. There's not much of an exclusion policy. And I just wonder, there was such a strong feeling about it. And I wasn't particularly happy with the answer to Councillor Cuthbert's question, because it is such a big thing and it is something that's brought up all the time. We constantly hear about bullying at the academy. And I don't know whether, because of that and because of what was said during the inspection, there's going to be a huge change, but I think there drastically needs to be a big change in it, and there needs to be consequence for it.
I think, just before you answer that, I mean, I think that I don't doubt for a second that the bullying is an issue, and I don't doubt for a second the angst that this gives parents, for all parents. There's always consequence, and I think when Miss Paul answers, then it has to be in relation to the academy particularly, and then I'll bring in Sheena for a broader answer if that's okay.
I think I would disagree that it's a huge issue. I think any child experiencing bullying behaviour is something that we want to address. I think it's dangerous to get into generalisations, is all I'm meaning. In relation to consequences, there is absolutely a very strong policy in place that we follow. We will always try to put an intervention in place to work with a young person who is experiencing bullying behaviour or displaying bullying behaviour. If the vast majority of young people will respond positively to that intervention, if they do not, then again, a consequence will emerge. And as I said earlier, exclusion from school is a last resort, but that's not something that we wouldn't consider should that be required, and have considered in other cases. So it's not the case that there are no consequences. I think what sometimes people mean is that they maybe don't agree with the processes that we've put into place or the way that it's been dealt with, but that's maybe a wider issue in terms of where schools were 20 years ago to where they are now in terms of trauma-informed practice, supporting every child to improve. So where I would argue that putting a child out of school is less effective than working with them in a programme like I was mentioning to Councillor Frampton's question earlier.
Sheila, please.
I think about a number of concerns that are raised by parents across different schools. One of them can relate to the fact that when incidences of bullying do occur, and they do occur, and we've had discussions about this, Bailey, that can then sometimes be followed up by, Eleanor's alluded to this, that people believe or perceive that there are no consequences, and that may just be because they don't see that or they hear about that, but that doesn't mean to say that they don't happen. And the wider universal policy around anti-bullying is clear about the role of consequences in that. People need to understand that, you know, actions have consequences and what that is. And of course, we discussed earlier about autonomy and discretion. And of course, schools will understand what are the best approaches to take in relation to particular youngsters and how they respond. And I would want to support Eleanor's comment about the fact that, you know, exclusion is a last resort. It's not something that should be used regularly as a means for managing situations, because if you're having to use it regularly, it means that exclusion in itself is not working. And what we also know, of course, that outcomes for young people who are routinely excluded later on in life tend to be far less good than those who have not been. And therefore, it's not a first stop shop place that we would go to, but absolutely is used. But the issue about consequences are that there are consequences. What may not always be obvious is what they are to people who are not directly involved. And there are limits to what we're able to share about what is applicable in the case of other children and young people. And I know that people find that frustrating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Go for it.
Okay, in the report, it says an important next step would be to consult with young people about the strategies that best support their learning. The advice included should be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure it is relevant to the developing needs of each learner. Now, my thing about this is, I presume this is an ASN CYPP situation. I'm just a wee bit staggered that we don't do that anyway. I mean, the whole point of doing a CYPP is to work out what's needed to support a child. And if we're not asking the child for their views, well, that just doesn't make sense. So I'm just a bit confused about that. So could you sort of give some, I presume you've looked into all these comments and you can give me some comment on that?
Sorry, could you maybe repeat the question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just really asking you to comment on the fact that the report seems to imply that the young people aren't being consulted about the strategies that should be applied to support their learning. Why that is.
Thank you. I think that's one of the reasons why we know that there is work to be done and the rating is weak, because there is inconsistency. So part of what the Perth and Kinross new paperwork for the child's planning process has a section where young person's views are included in that. And that's actually standard practice to include the voice of young people, but sometimes in the creation of plans and the number of young people, it's not always been the case that a young person's been involved in the regular review of that. And as they grow and mature, their needs might change, and therefore the advice that we would give, that our strategies might change. So it's very much a case that we are making sure that we've got systems and processes in place that make sure that a young person's voice is included in their paperwork. It's inconsistent at the moment.
Yeah, the last question, it says that all teachers access pupil support overviews to provide them with a helpful range of learning strategies to support young people with additional support needs. However, teachers apply these strategies inconsistently. And again, this is this question of, if we're not asking the kids what they think should be in the strategies, then you've got strategies, but they're not being applied. It kind of negates the whole thing. So I'm just wondering what's being done about that.
I think I would refer to the comments I made earlier about the learning and teaching approach not being separate from additional support needs, and that universal support and targeted support in the school should sit as part of the lesson and be involved in the planning of the teacher, which is where we're seeing inconsistency at the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to have the last question, if that's okay. I'm wondering if we're seeking any external input into learning and teaching and how we might improve that.
Well, I mentioned the training that we've undertaken, and a lot of research shows that peer observation, teachers being able to genuinely visit each other's classrooms and learn and have that conversation from what they've seen, is a really meaningful way of improving learning and teaching. And that was the reason for, although we have a validated self-evaluation process where we're having formal observations within the school and from the local authority, that we try to get teachers really engaged in their craft, in engaging with professional learning, and getting out of the school and going to see other schools and having that experience of looking to see what other people do within their subject, but in a different local authority or a different school. So that's definitely part of it. We've also purchased some professional learning reading, and what we're trying to do is build up that collegiate, career-long professional learning culture within the school to make sure that everyone is engaged with the improvement of learning and teaching, because if people are able to have that experience of actually talking about what they enjoy, they're more likely to buy in to what we're trying to do to change.
David, thank you.
I suppose just in terms of conversations we had earlier on about the round, it was just to reassure members that we've a head teacher, secondary head teacher network on Wednesday this week, and that's one of the agenda items. So Sheena spoke earlier on about some of the actions that are happening immediately, but our improvement planning for next year, both central and at school level, in terms of that quality of teaching will be there, about how we can maximise and utilise the expertise that actually does sit within Perth and Kinross secondary sector, because there is some there, but also how we can look outwards to get that national picture so that we can take that improvement action forward on a cohesive basis, because I think what we've seen is that improvement is greater and has greater stickability when we do it together. So that'll be a conversation we'll be having on Wednesday.
Thanks, David. Sheena?
I think if I may come back to words that have been used by members earlier, which is about credibility and reassurance. I think where we're looking at an overall evaluation of week in relation to learning and teaching, I would expect that members and parents and others would want a reassurance that what we're not just doing is looking within the school where that was evaluated as such, but we are looking wider, and that would, as David says, and Eleanor, involve colleagues from other schools, but any other external support as well that would be considered to be helpful in order to give that credibility and that reassurance that perhaps would be needed. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks everyone for that answer. Thanks very much. Given the nature of the report, it's quite right that we've had some challenging questions there, and genuinely thank members for those. I'd also like to thank Miss Paul, Eleanor, for coming in and answering them really honestly, actually, and we look forward to, well, I'm saying our hard work, it's you and your team's hard work, I guess, but look forward to seeing the fruits of that hard work. So thanks very much to members, but also to Eleanor, Paul, for coming in. Thank you very much. Thank you. You don't need to stay if you've got work to do. Feel free to do so, but quite happy for you to go. And thanks again. I think, given that we're now an hour and a half in, we'll have a very short recess actually for well, what we would do in recess. Comfort break. That's the word I'm looking for. Comfort break's the word I'm looking for. So just 5 minutes, if that's okay with everyone. We'll have a quick 5-minute break. We'll get on with it now if that's okay. So, Mrs. Dugan, I don't know if you want to introduce this next part of it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So we're going to start with the inspection report from Abernight Primary School. So Abernight was inspected in the week beginning the 23rd of October 2023. At the time of inspection, Mrs. Jen Clark, head teacher, had been in post for 5.5 years. The school roll at the time was 27 pupils, which was split over 2 classes, a primary 1 to 3 and a primary 3 to 7. And the report was published on the 12th of December. This was a full model inspection, so all of the 4 quality indicators were inspected, and there was 1 member of the inspection team for the week. And across all 4 of the quality indicators, the school was evaluated as very good for each of those. There were several key strengths identified. They were around the children who are polite, confident, keen to contribute. They engaged very well. They're very proud of their learning, enjoyed sharing it, and particularly noted was their knowledge of nature and the environment. The extremely effective leadership of the head teacher in creating a culture of inclusivity and collaboration, together with staff, their relentless focus on wellbeing and improvement results in very positive outcomes for the learners. Also recognised was the learning experiences of the children, high quality indoor and outdoor, provided by staff, and that includes the use of digital technologies, enriching learning very well. The high levels of attainment and achievement across the school were also recognised. One area for improvement was identified at the time, and it was a continue, so it was work that was already underway, continue to extend strong partnership working through linking further with other schools for aspects of children's learning to support children to achieve maximum success. And so Mrs. Jen Clark is here to take you through the response to that action. Thank you.
Yeah. So our key action includes a particular focus on providing opportunity for children to share their learning and to learn with and from peers with similar characteristics. So some of the actions that we have done is we started to reach out to a primary school in Shetland to connect some of our senior pupils together who do not have other pupils in their cohort. This will then provide the children with wider audience an opportunity to share learning and potentially allow for the children to engage in peer assessment with a child at their stage, which was something that was highlighted through our discussions with the inspector. Our school have made contact with the staff team at a primary school in Fliec, which is Abernight's twin town in France. Our primary 3 to 7 children have made contact with other children of their age and stage through writing and receiving letters from a pen friend, both in English and in French, allowing the children to learn in a practical and meaningful way. And we hope to continue to build on this partnership as we move forward into the next academic session. We will continue to work in partnership with our local management group schools in creating opportunities for our children to share their learning experiences. We've got strong partnerships with our neighbouring school and also with our local comparator schools, and we will continue to plan for children's involvement in transition opportunities, workshop inclusion, and then sharing of success of learning. Following on from our inspection, I have shared a local authority event with head teacher colleagues. I've welcomed local head teachers to visit Abernight and share our school journey in more detail. And there are a few reciprocal visits planned with schools which will lead to sharing learning and teaching approaches together. We're also very delighted that there was also practice worth sharing more widely, recognised in terms of partnership and our outdoor learning offer as well. The inspector found through outdoor learning experiences that our children are environmentally knowledgeable about nature and learning for sustainability and are empowered to take responsibility for our planet, keen to do their best to protect it. And we were asked to write up a case study about our outdoor learning offer, which will be shared nationally via the Education Scotland website. And I believe we have a proposed publication date week beginning the 24th of June. So we're very much looking forward to sharing that. The high expectations of our children comes out very clearly in the report, and as such we are continuing to raise the bar through increasing our digital skills to enhance our learning and teaching offer, which includes a continuation of high level of professional development in computational thinking using robots and computing science. So I'd like to say how incredibly proud our whole school community are of our report, that we will continue to work together to ensure that we can all continue to be the best that we can be. And to finish, I would like to recognise and thank the ongoing support that we receive and I receive from my Quality Improvement Officer and the wider central team. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Are there any questions? Elected members? None at all. Thank you. I'd just like to say, from my point of view, thanks very much for not least for the hospitality that Councillor Harder and I got when we came out to see the school. It's really nice to be speaking, given the quite appropriate challenges we've had from the previous inspection report. It's really nice to be speaking about what's clearly a proper, fantastic school with 4 very goods. So if you can take our thanks here for yourself and your staff, and you've clearly got a very engaged cohort of parents as well. And I think it's just it's a really good news story, and it's nice to see. So thanks very much for all the hard work that you do, and in particular that presentation that you've given to us. I don't know if anybody has a comment. Councillor Shires.
No, it was just to echo your comments, convener, that it's really encouraging, positive, and even the language in the inspection report where it talks about relentless focus and maximising success, and language like that, you can get the feel of what the inspectors experience and what they're trying to convey in written words, which is really positive, and I'm sure will have brought great pleasure to staff, parents and pupils. So thank you very much for all you've done, because I know you've been on a journey since you came to Perth and Kinross as well, and is obviously bearing fruit. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Shires. Councillor Barrett.
I'd just like to add to what Councillor Rebeck, Councillor Shires said, that this is a great report. Congratulations to you all, and thank you for cheering us up.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to say thanks for your patience today as well. I know there was a little wait, but it was really important that we heard what you had to say about the success of your school, and it's important that we recognise it formally here as well. So thanks for your patience, thanks for all your hard work, and yeah, just generally thank you. Mrs. Dugan.
Thank you. So our next report is for Calais Primary School. Calais was inspected during the week beginning the 13th of November 2023, and at this time Miss Vicky Donaldson beside me had been in post for just under 2 months, having started in September 2023, and she had formed the new senior leadership team along with the existing principal teacher in the school. The school roll at the time was 25 pupils with 2 classes across primary 1 to 3 and a primary 4 to 7. And the report was published on the 26th of January. This was also a full model inspection, so it covered all 4 quality indicators. And across all 4 quality indicators, evaluations were good. Key strengths identified by the inspector in the school at the time, it recognised the strong ethos of teamwork among staff who had remained resilient and positive through times of change, and it was really recognised in terms of always putting the children first. Articulate, enthusiastic and happy children. They enjoy learning together in mixed age groups, and the older children showing kindness and understanding as they supported younger ones. The highly successful partnerships with parents and the local community were recognised, and it was really noted that the school is really truly at the heart of the community. And for Vicky, the highly effective head teacher was recognised in a very short time, having identified the strengths of the school and the key areas for improvement, and quickly having gained the confidence of staff, children and parents. And she had demonstrated her significant leadership skills to ensure the school will continue to flourish and grow. So those were recognised. There were several 3 next steps identified. One of them around 2 of them were continue, so work that was underway. Continue to raise children's attainment and literacy, sharing best practice in learning, teaching and assessment across the staff team. Continue to develop the curriculum to broaden children's experiences in and beyond the school. And as planned, as well, increase the ways that parents can contribute to improving the school and participate as full partners in their children's learning. And Vicky's going to share where she's got to with that.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, and thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Jill. We were really pleased about our inspection. It was quite quick off the mark for me coming in, but my really dedicated staff team and my QIO were a great help in helping me get supported and ready for this inspection. As Jill said, our first priority was to continue to raise children's attainment in literacy by sharing best practice in learning, teaching and assessment across the team. Our key actions here have included being involved in the National Improving Writing Programme. This has been very successful for us this year with our primary 4 children, and we're planning to incorporate the successful elements of this into our wider literacy planning. We've already improved our target setting to facilitate greater independence in learning, and this change has taken place, and children are already reporting to me that they are aware of their learning and their next steps in learning. Stage planning. So currently our staff have been planning in isolation, and as a partner head teacher, I'm hoping that my teachers will start to plan with a stage partner, primarily to share effective practice, moderation, and share their high quality learning and teaching ideas. Continued effective learning and teaching in literacy using successful approaches, e.g. Talk for Writing and the improvement programme and book studies. We're revising our assessment and moderation materials and ensuring they are more closely linked to the national benchmarks. This has happened already in school, and staff are reporting that they feel more confident in making their assessment judgments. Our second action was to continue to develop the curriculum to broaden children's experiences and skills in and beyond their school and community. So we already have a wide range of opportunities in Calais for the children, and they're involved in all sorts of groups where they have their own leadership opportunities. And we also follow celebration days, and through religious and moral education and our IDL, we're reviving the whole platform of learning there for our children. Our local moderation group priority next session will be wider achievement to support our opportunities for pupils within and out with the school, and really give our children an outward facing view of the rest of their educational community. We plan to review our school values, and ensuring resilience is a key element, forming part of wider school learning on the principles of nurture and developing a growth mindset. We are planning to increase our parental involvement, and during the inspection we had a really positive parent body who were keen to be involved. Already we've developed a parent focus group to really start to involve our parents in key elements for discussion, such as cost of the school day, attendance and self-evaluation. We've had one well-attended session and very positive feedback from parents. We are reviving our Meet the Teacher sessions and changing the content and the format of these to further engage parents. We hope to be engaging in Health Week, anti-bullying, literacy and numeracy themed events. We are involved in the development of an online platform to continue to share and refresh the sharing of learning targets, celebration of achievements and learning with our parents. In addition, we are also focusing on leadership at all levels, continuing to provide many opportunities for our children in a small country rural school. We are improving our self-evaluation, reviewing the model for improvement to include more regular evaluation opportunities, improved methods of information gathering and a greater involvement of all stakeholders. Improved teacher professionalism and skill in making assessment judgments. As I said before, reviving our materials using for moderation and for making assessment judgments of our pupils. We had some additional positives from our inspector, and it was really nice to hear that she was able to identify how strong and dedicated our staff team is at Calais. They always keep the needs of the children at the centre of all planning and are committed to their ongoing school development. And it was also really nice to hear that they'd identified our commitment to the principles of play in the early classroom, recognised at Calais as ensuring that planned learning is motivating and meaningful, providing younger children with daily opportunities to lead their own learning. The activities that staff provide provoke and encourage children's curiosity and creativity. And as Jen said, we were very proud of our inspection as well. We had a positive experience and everybody was really pleased. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, in fact, Mrs. Donaldson, at this point? Councillor Cuthbert, will you ask a question? No, you're okay. Thank you. Thanks again, indeed, for your patience again. But we know that when a good means a good, that's what I'm trying to say. So congratulations on a really positive report. It's lovely to hear again that we're doing well. And it does strike me that although with apology, I wasn't able to come to the public meeting on the inspection report, so apologies for that. I'd love to have come out, but I have been out in and around the area and other times. It does strike me anecdotally that Calais is very much at the heart of the community, which I think is really important when you're a rural setting. So thank you very much again. Councillor Shires, you have a comment.
Thank you. It was just to congratulate you on the reports that you missed a cup of tea and a proper cup and saucer at the school. Not just any cup of tea, a proper cup of tea.
Make sure I'm there the next time.
And biscuits. So it was just to thank you for the meeting at the school, because you got a real feel for, you know, what you were saying within the environment, which is very colourful. I thought Gilton was colourful, and then I went to Calais. And there was obviously that, you know, what it talked about in the report, and what you've highlighted about parental engagement, you know, the parent focus group and doing things a little bit differently from just having the parent council model, and was clearly welcomed by the gentleman from the parent body that was at the meeting. So I wish you every success with that, and hopefully it'll be one that other schools can maybe have a look at as a different way of doing things. So it certainly was of interest to me, because I know that parental engagement issue is one that a lot of schools do struggle with parents being busy and not always fitting around the school day, etc. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye out and hopefully get some feedback on how that progresses.
Thank you, Councillor Shires, and thanks again, Mrs. Donaldson. Please accept our congratulations and take our thanks back to your staff as well. Thank you. Mrs. Dugan.
Thank you. And finally, our last report is for Craigie Primary School. And this was an inspection of the school and nursery class in June 2023, week beginning the 12th of June. And at the time of the inspection, there were 195 children on the school roll across 8 primary classes, and the nursery had 30 children attending at the time. Leslie Gibson was in post as head teacher at the time, and she has since retired, with Hazel Freeland taking up post last Monday. And as Sheena said, I will take the committee through the report rather than Hazel, but Hazel has come along this afternoon as well, should anybody wish to ask her anything. And I would just like to acknowledge Leslie's input to this inspection at the time, and our thanks to her for all that she did while in post at Craigie. So this was a short model inspection, so it was 2 quality indicators of learning, teaching and assessment, and raising attainment and achievement. And in the nursery, it was learning, teaching and assessment and securing children's progress. Across the school, the evaluations that were reached were good, and across the nursery, in both quality indicators, they were very good. And the inspection team found the following strengths in the school's work. They were around the school's shared values and supportive learning environment, creating an inclusive and caring ethos in the school and nursery, where children are valued and supported in their learning and well-being. Where the kindness was recognised across the school as well. The effective teamwork amongst the staff in the school and nursery, with all staff being keen to develop their skills and improve the learning experiences and outcomes for children. The effective use of data by senior leaders and staff, and their use of assessment information to identify and plan the correct support and challenge for children, which was allowing children to make good progress and achieve success. And then the high quality experiences for children in the nursery. They thrive in the exciting and stimulating nursery spaces. Practitioners work hard to ensure that all children in the nursery make the best possible progress in their learning. The areas that were identified for improvement across the class, the school and the nursery were around continuing to develop high quality learning and teaching more consistently across the school and ensuring relevant challenge and matching the needs of children, providing children with more opportunities to lead their own learning, and continuing to help children to identify and talk about the skills they're developing, and then continuing to build on the good progress the school has made to raise attainment in literacy and numeracy. So we were pleased that these were all continue and had already been identified by us and by the school. So for the first one, in terms of taking forward high quality learning and teaching more consistently, staff have begun to engage in the Perth and Kinross Learning, Teaching, Assessment and Moderation Framework with support from their Quality Improvement Officer, focusing on the key features of highly effective support and challenge. And they've agreed on a Craigie definition of what differentiation should look like in their school. And that's already leading to better consistency across the school. Early years staff are planning together to share the good practice that was identified in play pedagogy and to provide high quality learning play experiences across the school and the early learning and childcare setting. Writing moderation activities have taken place with the schools across the local management group to share learning and teaching approaches and resources and to explore the use of data, assessment data to inform planning. The progression frameworks produced by Perth and Kinross are being used for planning across all curricular areas, which are already leading to a clearer progression of skills across all stages. Providing children with more opportunities to lead their own learning and continuing to help them to identify and talk about their skills was the next area for improvement. And so the actions undertaken in numeracy, pupils have had enhanced opportunities to share their knowledge and skills with each other, and this is helping to develop their confidence in meaningfully sharing their learning with each other. In the upper school, teachers have been involved in professional learning on learner participation linked to pupils leading their own learning more, and that's resulted in children planning their own contexts for interdisciplinary learning. The impact is that children are more motivated, they have greater ownership, and they're developing a greater sense of curiosity. This has been observed already. They're becoming more aware of their skills and they're developing which are transferable across other curricular areas. Every child across the school has a leadership role in one of the 4 groups: the Planet Protectors, the Fab Fundraisers, Developing Our Environment group, and the Improving Health and Wellbeing group. And Hazel will be closely monitoring the impact of these and supporting the work in that moving forwards. And finally, continuing to build on the good progress the school has made in raising attainment in literacy and numeracy. All staff have engaged with the Perth and Kinross Numeracy Schools programme, resulting in greater engagement, confidence and deeper understanding for pupils. The use of staff judgments are improving, being supported by assessment and able to talk about how children are progressing and what they require further in terms of support and challenge. Class data packs have been introduced, providing staff with a data overview of literacy and numeracy, and that data is analysed regularly, and stretch aims are agreed in tracking meetings around that for individual children. It's led to better understanding of literacy and numeracy attainment and is ensuring appropriate challenge and progress for individual learners. And then the early years staff are using milestone markers very effectively to plan for individual children in small groups. And they are using small group interventions to support increasing achievement, particularly in speech and language. As well as that, there were some key other strengths identified through the inspection that will continue to be worked on. These are around the use of celebrating personal achievement, and the opportunities that children have to participate in out-school activities. So Hazel will already is working very closely with her QIO and the staff team very quickly in the space of a week to ensure appropriate progress and continued monitoring, and she's already thinking about her next quality improvement plan for next year.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dugan. Are there any questions for Jill/Hazel at this point? All good. Thank you again, Mrs. Dugan. Thank you for your patience, Hazel, again. And very similar to the last couple of reports, if you can, I just want to put on record our thanks to Leslie and her team for getting the school to where it is now, but also welcoming our best wishes moving forward as well, Hazel. And if you can, congratulations and thanks back to your staff, that would be really appreciated. Any comments? Councillor Barrett?
Yes, I'd just like to add my thanks and congratulations to the team at Craigie Primary on the evaluations. I know they were celebrated by the pupils, their families and staff at the time, because it's in the ward. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Hazel and wish her all the best with the team. I know you're already making your mark with the pupils and relationships with them from a conversation I had with one on Saturday, so good start.
Thank you very much, everyone. At this point, apologies to Bailey Hearn. Had I read my procedural notes instead of just noting things in the back of it, I would have realised that we are at this point meant to move the report. So just to keep things right, we'll formally do that again. If you can second for me, please, Councillor Frampton.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments on the report broadly, or indeed on any of the appendices? Councillor Shars?
So it's not really a comment, it's just kind of that question I put in the chat about the next steps with regards to Perth Academy, because I think it's quite important that we just note that and know what will come back to us in the future.
It is important, and I think Sheena's going to answer you. Thank you.
Of the 4 papers that were here today for your consideration, 3 of them have HMI have indicated that there'll be no continued engagement with the school on behalf of HMI, and that it's for the school and the local authority just to continue to report on progress in the usual way, which predominantly is through the standards and quality reports for each of the schools. In relation to HMI, where Perth Academy, where HMI have evaluated 2 of the QIs as weak, that triggers follow through work from HMI, and what will happen is they will come back and undertake another inspection in the school 12 months on from the time of the first inspection, and then there will be a report produced by HMI which will give an overview of what they found at that time. They may in that decide to invoke what they would call disengagement. In other words, say we're now confident that the school is on the right lines, making the right amount of progress, and the pace of that progress is fine. They may of course decide that there needs to be ongoing and further engagement with them. But regardless of that, following on from the inspection in 12 months' time and that subsequent report, that will come to this committee for full consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Kathleen. If you've got a comment, I can't figure out whether that's like a legacy comment or not.
Oh, it is a comment. It's sort of a question actually. On page 32, I note that the inspections list doesn't include Alyth, Calais and Craigie, although it does include the Perth Academy reports. Presumably that will be updated for our next meeting. And also the one on partner providers doesn't include the latest report on the ABC nursery, which has been circulated to people and I know is just a bit of a concern to some. So I was just commenting on the fact that they're not in there. Okay, thank you.
Sheila?
I'll ask James to pick up on the first point in terms of what might not be in the table and make sure that that is up to date. In relation to ABC, Councillor Barrett, we have had further engagement with the Care Inspectorate and a further piece of work with them, and therefore we felt that it was important that what the committee got was the totality of all of that, and therefore we have scheduled to bring all of the information in relation to ABC to our next meeting, because we didn't have that in time for the papers being put together for this. So there will be a full and open discussion in relation to ABC at the next executive sub.
Thank you. Can we formally note the report at this stage? Thank you. Thanks again. We're done. Thank you.